Hey there everyone, I'm Michael, and welcome to LittleBigGamedev Episode 2. In the previous episode, we did a little game design document type thing to plan out what our level is going to look and act like. And I've gone ahead off camera and I've set up all of our different level tags and our description and all that stuff so that it's done and over with. We don't have a badge yet, but that's because I want the badge to be something final that we do before release. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about greyboxing. Now, at the end of it, I do have a time-lapse of me actually building things up here and working on the level. But this is the finished product, and I'm going to take you guys through a little tour of it so far. So as you can see, everything uses one material. The only thing I've done is I've placed checkpoints around the level. I'm greyboxing right now, and what that is it's sort of building the level, but in its functional state, not necessarily its good state. This is the foundation of the level that we're gonna build upon in future episodes to add the actual gameplay elements here. So it's sort of the framework of the level that we're doing here. So what I have here is I have various things for Sackboy to do. I've only gone as far as the electric scene in this level. So we have I've split this into scenes. The first thing that we have is our little intro area where we spawn in. This is going to be where Avalon's going to tell us about what's going on in the level. Then the next area we have is right here where we have some sort of Sackbot cage type thing where we have to rescue the Sackbots and get them following us. The next area is going to be something like what's in the Victoria levels in ep.2, is this little electric circuit thingy that you have to walk across and not get electrified. And then you flip a switch, and then that electric circuit turns off, a platform comes in, and the Sackbots are able to walk across. The next thing that we have is a little arc discharge type platforming thing with electricity. So there's going to be little arcing items here, and when they line up, it's going to create lightning that you have to jump across and not get hit by. If you get struck by lightning, you die, you spawn back at the checkpoint. Then you flip a switch and it turns off the electronics, and then Sackbots are able to jump across. And this here is going to be a bounce pad type section where some electricity is going to fire off some bounce pads that you have to jump across. I've planned this area out to be where you can find some prize bubbles. And I've planned this area here to have some little hazardous area on the side that we don't want to run into. And then this is the end of where I've greyboxed. And then this is going to be the spike scene as we planned out in the first video. Anyway, here's a time-lapse of me building this together. The important thing to know with level design in Little Big Planet is it's about as time-consuming as actually programming. But there are many ways you can actually make the process a whole lot smoother. And one of my tricks, and a lot of other people's tricks, is to use the game's big grid, as well as the rotation interval that you can find in the game's pause menu. If you use those, then it allows you to line things up pretty accurately and very easily, which allows me to heavily speed up my level design process. I'm also only using one material here simply because this is a greybox, and greyboxing means exactly what the name entails. You are basically using a grey box to design the level, or rather a bunch of grey boxes. In a game engine, you would just use their primitive material, and generally, it's literally a grey box. So in this case, I'm using basic cardboard to build out the level structure, and then later on in episode 3, I'm gonna work on figuring out artistically what this is gonna look like, what materials I'm gonna use, and what music I'm gonna use, and stuff like that. And then in episode 4, we're gonna do actual gameplay. And I'm thinking that the fourth part of this is gonna be across multiple videos, because I don't want to be doing time-lapses for all of this. I'm doing time-lapses for this right now because this is a very boring and time-consuming process if you don't speed it up. You really don't want to see me playing or placing down a bunch of cardboard boxes everywhere. It's just not fun. Also, I will tell you right now that we are dealing with hot weather right now in Canada, so It is a little uncomfortable to work on this, but you know what? I'm having fun. Anyway, another trick that you're gonna see me use a lot in this is using the corner editor and the slice tool. I use the slice tool to break up pieces of the level so that they become separate pieces of geometry, and this is especially important for dynamic thermometer in LittleBigPlanet 3. Because the bigger the object is, the larger its loading zone, which means the more RAM will be used by the game. And since the game does work on PS3, we want to make sure that our level fits in the PS3's RAM, and that way everyone who plays the level is going to have the best experience possible. So keeping the loading zones down is a very good way to do that. I also use the corner editor to actually just speed up my process when filling in backgrounds, so that I can just fill in the outline using the shape tool, and then go into the corner editor and delete the inner corners, and then the game will realize, well, I want to create a massive piece of geometry. Another thing that I use very often in this is static physics, instead of gluing things down or using anti-gravity tweakers. Anti-gravity tweakers are a LittleBigPlanet 2 thing, and they do work for keeping things suspended in midair. In LittleBigPlanet 1, we would actually use dark or light matter to have things suspended in midair. But in LittleBigPlanet 3, we have access to static physics, which is also available on LittleBigPlanet PSP and PS Vita. And what that does is it tells the game's engine that the object doesn't have any gravity, it doesn't have any sort of interactive physics, it's just there in the world, suspended in midair, and that means that the game takes up less frame time trying to calculate where that object is, because, you know, there's no physics. So I use that a lot, and I try to avoid gluing things together in the level, because, again, with dynamic thermometer, although we're not using it right now, when you glue something together, those two objects become considered one object by the game's engine, which increases its loading zone, and then increases the amount of RAM that object uses on the PS3. So I want to avoid that. So static physics is a good way to prevent me from having to glue things together in most cases. There are some cases where I still need to do it, for example with these checkpoint pedestals you keep seeing me place around. I do glue the checkpoint to the actual pedestals so that I can move them around in conjunction without having to highlight them. But that's already a very small loading zone, so I'm not concerned about that. But for large pieces of geometry, my general practice is static physics, no gluing. But anyway, those are just the tips I wanted to give as I build this level out. Also, as you saw before I started this time-lapse, there is no... I'm only doing the electric section because, again, it's hot, it's hard to sit down and record level design for hours on end, so I'm only going to be doing the electric scene in this one, and probably in future episodes I'll show you the fire and the spikes and the water and all those other scenes. But this should still give you a good idea of my process. Another thing that I actually do is I actually tend to have the game's lighting mode set to nighttime until I actually need daytime. That way, the game's background actually contrasts better with the game's Poppet UI, which is a me thing. I'm blind, and not being able to see the game's user interface is not great, so that's just something I do. So you'll see me go into the global settings every now and then and set the game between day and night, and that's why. But this level is going to take place in the daytime, like we discussed in episode 1, which, by the way, I still recommend you guys watch if you haven't watched that already. Anyway, I'm going to be quiet now and put on the Monstercat music and enjoy the rest of the level design.
I'm drowning in devotion. I'm lost, can't find a new emotion that's ever enough. And I can't deny it's real, 'cause there's no deeper
And just like that, I'm done greyboxing this part of the level, so I'm just gonna run through it one last time. So we've got our intro scene, and there's the cage scene, although it's not really visible to us. Then we're gonna run through the first electricity scene, which isn't functional yet. Hit the pretend switch. Get to the checkpoint. Now we're on the second platforming scene. And the pretend switch. Third checkpoint. Then we're at the bounce pad scene, which we can't get any further because there's no bounce pads yet, but this is the prize bubble area. But anyway, that'll do it for this video, and as always, I hope you learned something, I hope you enjoyed watching the video, and I cannot wait to see you guys in episode 3. I've been Michael, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.